Welcome back to another episode of Sorry for Rambling. As always, I'm your host, Alex Cack, and I am joined today by singer, pop star, Terry McDermott. Terry, how are you doing?
Good. How you doing?
We live in weird times, but
We certainly do.
all things considered, I think I'm doing well. Are you staying safe out there?
Yeah. Just trying to avoid the plague like everybody else.
It's a full-time job.
It is, yeah. And
It re-
being in studios, musicians, and kids, of course, at home. You just don't know what you're catching. Well, that's the reality of 2020.
It really is, though. How has it impacted your recording schedule? Are you still able to record anything? Are you still working on anything?
Well, I've got a good setup at home, so if I need to record vocals I've done a couple of things for charity tracks in the UK while this has been going on. So I've actually got a setup where I can record pretty good quality vocals. But when I want to record something that's going to be a final piece or work with my band, I have to go to a studio, and that's a little more complex. There is something slightly surreal about you all packing into a car to drive to the studio, and you're all driving with masks on. It looks like you can go hold up a bank.
Have
But
you
yeah,
ever
no,
have you ever stopped and thought maybe we should just knock over this bank before we get to the studio?
yeah, we actually joked about that. We stopped to get supplies before going into the studio, and we're like, we could just hold this up. It's not our, and then we can claim later we were just protecting ourselves. So, yeah.
And yeah, I want to talk a little bit, obviously, about kind of your rise to prominence, because you were a contestant on The Voice. You were a
Yeah,
fan favorite. What was that
yeah.
experience like? I've always been curious. I mean, what's the behind the scenes of being on one of those shows like?
I have to say, I was a little, well, I won't say snobby before I went on the show. I guess my view was that it was going to be this kind of false, I guess, kind of sickly experience compared to what I was used to. I'd been on major labels, and I'd been in a band that was got signed to a major label from, I guess, more traditional background, which is you start a band with guys from your hometown. The band gets good, in its city, and then the band gets signed to a big American label, and off you go. That's kind of what we had in our minds. So I guess I was a little bit snobby about it. I thought this pop reality TV thing. I thought, well, they're going to pay me, so I'll go and do it. So I have to say, I was very surprised when I did it, because they're very hardworking people. There's a real authenticity about the way people work on that show. Working really, really long days, working very long hours, and everyone's pulling in the direction of just trying to make you sound and look good. So very, very grateful for the experience. It was very positive, I have to say, and I don't think there was anything about it that I came away thinking, God, that was bad. I think the people, the experience, of course, the notoriety you gain from being on the show. Just in general, it was a very professional experience. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought I thrived on that. That's what I was used to, working with labels and such. So that was very positive.
I'm always curious. I think when because I feel like being on a reality show, it's got to be such a unique experience. It's probably for like a year of your life, you're doing something that's so different than at any other stage of your career, or that almost any other person will ever experience. There's got to be a unique bond that you form with some of the other cast members and contestants on a show like that.
Very much so. I think it's unavoidable. It's a bubble of an experience, obviously, because of the secrecy required when they're dealing with results, and they're dealing with the potential for press to be around at the time. You have to maintain that secrecy, and as a result, you're not seeing an awful lot of people other than the people that you see on the show. So living in that bubble, you do get to know people very well. You get to experience, you get to learn a lot about their lives. They get to learn a lot about yours. And in terms of that bubble, to me, it was very similar to being on tour. I'd done a lot of touring by the time I was on The Voice. And, I've been in buses, I've been in vans, I've been in all kinds of contraptions, going around the world. So just being locked into a schedule, being locked into a rhythm every day, getting up, very early, go to work, and then feeling good about it. That was very similar. It was very similar, and I think that gave a lot. The people that had been professional musicians for years, I think it gave us a slight advantage, to be honest, because we had no problem kind of just squeezing into someone's schedule or squeezing into an alien environment and just kind of going with it. And yeah, I think we learned, like for instance, Rudy Paris was a roommate of mine for a long time, and still a friend. I love Rudy; he's a great guy. And we had enough time to learn all a bit about each other's careers, and we pretty much knew each other inside out by the time we battled on the show. So,
You ever think about collaborating with any of them?
well, yeah, actually, I mean, we talked about it in the past. There was actually a moment there where I think myself, Rudy, and Nicholas David were actually talking about touring together, and it was a possibility, but it's difficult. I've been doing a lot of European touring, and schedules just never matched up. It's trying to get all the lines to intersect. It's kind of, you only get like 2 or 3 chances a year for that to happen, and at the time it just never did.
It is got to be difficult trying to line things up like that. I think that's going to be one of the biggest, the logistics of touring has to be one of the hardest parts. Aside from I think the personal side of it, you're a family man, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
How do you balance that with being a touring musician, your time on The Voice? What's that like?
I certainly don't tour as much as extensively as I used to. For instance, when I was in my band Dragline from Scotland, we were touring 10 months out of the year, which we're putting an enormous strain on things. But I can be selective if a tour's going to come up. Try not to run it over a month, so you're not away for too much longer. Obviously, the kids running around here.
It's like you had that set up as you said it. One came by.
You'll just see the odd flash like flying by. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's a lot more difficult now. My kids are at an age where if I'm away for an extended period, we definitely will notice it, definitely feel it. So try not to go too crazy on that, but still, I mean, getting out in Europe for a month, and it's not something you want to do every week. Get home and be home for a week. So you've got to be selective, and it's a different environment, I think, to the way it used to be. I'm not on a major label. And I'm not going to be touring for 10 months out of the year. And people digest music, I think, a little bit differently than they used to. You're not locked into an album cycle like you were back in the day. Now it's very single-centric. It's very focused on one track, and it's somebody's really got to fall in love with the track to want to go and investigate your album. It's not a given the way it used to be. So that I think that changes the way that we work touring with music.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, actually, because I mean, it was the tour was so much designed to kind of support the album and drive sales of the album for so long, and that isn't how it works at all anymore. I mean, I think even the set lists that musicians play when they're performing live, like how they structure those, have changed in light of that.
I think so. I think it's I definitely saw a rapid change when I left. I was on A&M and then Geffen, and I think both those labels, when we were working towards an album release, you're very much focused on what will be promotion of the album, what will be promotion of a record, a collection of, I think, 10 or 10, 12 songs, maybe 12 for us. And, that just doesn't exist anymore. That's just not the same way. I think there's a degree of vanity involved where you want, if you're lucky enough to have a great song on the table, then you want to surround it with other great songs, and you want people to come to that. But in terms of how you market that or promote it, I mean, really you're just focusing on the song. I don't think you're going to waste time and effort focusing on the album the same way that you used to. It doesn't, certainly in my experience, it doesn't seem to be as constructive as it used to be. The model's definitely changed, and I don't think it's going back the way it was. So,
I think we talk a lot about how the music industry's changed, like the actual kind of minutia of it. There's a million articles and think pieces about. Yeah. I mean, going back to Napster, this has been kind of, there's almost a cottage industry of people talking about how music's changing, but how we talk about the actual quality. Like, do you think that do you think that these changes have been positive for the music industry, or do you think they've been a setback?
Hard to gauge that, to be honest. I think in terms of the quality, it's easy to sit and judge modern contemporary music against your taste. Everyone's got their own taste. Everyone knows what they like. As music evolves and changes, as it always does, it's easy to compare that to what you like and say, oh, I don't like this or I don't like that. But the truth is, that's all the case. It's the same reason your grandfather probably doesn't like the music you listen to, or your kids won't like the music that you listen to. Think it's outdated and such. So I don't know in terms of quality. I mean, if I'm going to put my granddad hat on for a second, I suppose it does seem far more disposable. I think the very nature of kind of disassembling the album, taking apart the LP, means that you don't have that same narrative that runs through a collection of songs. There's not going to be as much time spent on that narrative. And I think that impacts the way that artists view the material they're creating. For instance, if you're just focusing on the one single, then there's no motivation for that to be part of a bigger picture. That is the picture. And I think there's a real urge just to get that 3-minute 30 disposable entity and kind of move on. And I think the way we listen to music as well, it's much more ADD. I mean, are we going to sit and plug our headphones in and listen to? I mean, I know plenty of people do sit with the headphones on and listen to vinyl, but I mean, that's not the way we consume music now. I mean, you listen to something on your phone, you listen to something in your car, you listen to something on a small device where, quite honestly, the quality of the music's so degraded anyway that that's not the first concern. So yeah, definitely a different. It's a far different landscape. It's very alien to what I grew up with, but that doesn't mean is it bad? I don't know. I mean, people are still getting spins. People are still. I mean, the human race is still just as drawn to music. I would like to see more, I guess, more depth, but pop's pop,
It's weird as a music fan. Like growing up, I was a huge music nerd. That was like a refuge for me. But I came of age right in the sweet spot where it was changing over. So I got to watch kind of all the different digital steps unfold and participate in all of them, and yet also got a little analog time. And I feel like I'm in this kind of almost sweet spot where I've got 2 shelves of vinyl back here, and at the same time I very naturally took to streaming when it came out. But I've noticed, and I've been thinking about this recently, and I don't know if you've had this experience, that there's almost, even listening to the same albums, there's a different experience. There's like a different user experience, and there's a different set of emotions that will come listening. I listened to The Color and the Shape the other day by the Foo Fighters. I have it on vinyl, and I listened to it on my phone twice in the same day, I think it was, and it hit me so distinctly differently, the same songs. What is it about that kind of physical aspect of holding music in your hand that does it? Do you have that same sensation?
Absolutely. I've very recently picked up one of my. Well, I actually had this a while. I've got a vinyl collection downstairs as well, and one of the albums I most recently picked up was Dire Straits' first album, which I loved growing up, which is a great record. Really stood the test of time. I could actually just sit here and talk for an hour about how awesome that record is, which I'm not going to do.
Go for it, honestly, because you're not wrong.
Yeah, no, it's a great record. It's an absolutely great record. I've always said it's a 9-song record, which is fascinating in itself. It's just the perfect number for them. I love that. But there is something to be said about getting the audio quality right, and the detail of the audio, the attention to detail about how you consume it is just as much part of the experience. You're sitting holding, the album cover, the artwork, the vinyl artwork. You have to very delicately, take care of it. You have to be precious with it. You have to kind of sling it in. If you do scratch it, and that's kind of ruin the experience. But there's something more precious about it, and I know it's an endless debate, but for me, there is a richer quality to vinyl that I enjoy, and I think just by definition, you're more precious about the product because it is more fragile, and I think that speaks to the way that we treat an album as opposed to something that you picked up listening to a commercial, for a 3-minute that you then listen to on Spotify. Without even thinking about it, the act of purchasing a record, the act of committing to a record is not what it used to be. Again, is that worse? I guess it depends on what you're used to. Obviously, I'm used to that. So yeah, I think it's diminished. But is that really going to affect my kids going to be crying to get back to like why can't we get double gatefold Dark Side of the Moon? Well, that's not it's not going to happen. It's not a concern they've got. But they're still going to love music just as much. So I think really it just speaks to how different it is from what we're used to. I don't think it speaks to it being that much poorer. In terms of audio quality, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's no competition for sitting with great headphones, good vinyl, the right EQ, compared to somebody playing something on the phone and going, "Wow, that's good." So
I want to kind of jump in a different direction. Is maybe curious, what are the things you're listening to lately, especially through this whole kind of crazy year that we're all going through? What's the music that's getting you through it?
let's have a look. What have I been listening to? I mean, I'm a sucker for British rock because obviously I grew up in the UK. I grew up in Scotland. Um, I fell in love with Liam Gallagher's new album, which I have to say is just fantastic. It's a great record. Kind of shocked me the first one he released that it had this real depth to it, and the second one. I've been listening a lot to Sam Fender. I don't know if you know who this guy is. He's
I don't think I do.
This kid's voice is just incredible. He's I don't know how to describe it. He's if anyone's watching this, listen to Sam Fender. He's just a tremendous artist. He's from Newcastle in England, and there's a real depth to this kid's voice. He's a powerhouse, and the songs, I guess the kilter of the songs kind of speak to what's going on in the world right now, and it just kind of fits in. It's a good fit. I don't know what else have I listened to. I've been listening to a lot of there's a band from Dublin actually which I love called Fontaines DC. And if you want to just like completely cleanse your palate and start with something and then look confused for the first minute before you're like, what is this? It honestly has that effect. Listen to Fontaines DC from Dublin, put it on, and for the first minute you'd be like, I have no idea what this is, but I love it. So
I think that's
well worth trying it.
That's what we need right now. It's something that's so unique it's distracting. To me, we need art right now, and
absolutely
we need music more than ever.
I think it's obviously no coincidence that through the late '60s, protest change, a sweeping social atom bomb was going off, and I think that was reflected in the art of the time, whether it be contemporary art, fine art, music, and I think whenever there's tumultuous times in human history, art expresses or reflects that. And I always love saying if you look at the expression of cinema through the '70s, when we were coming out of the Vietnam era, it was very dark, very dreary. So things like Mean Streets or Taxi Driver, these were Apocalypse Now. These were movies that really kind of, or even Serpico. These were movies that kind of really caught the darkness of the times. And I think the art now should be reflecting that as well. I think it should be an expression of how we're feeling. It's the reason that we all kind of bond together. The song speaks to you, and it doesn't just speak to you; it speaks to the guy sitting next to you. So in that respect, I think it has a role to play, and it's also cathartic.
Do you think culturally we're in a comparable time to the 1960s or to the early 70s, some of these tumultuous times?
It's obviously hard to judge because I think we're in a particularly turbulent time. I think politically, I don't think we've ever seen this before. Mainly because we've never had people's views, their opinions so polarized and also so magnified, hyper magnified, constantly hyper magnified. Because you only have to turn on social media for 5 minutes and you just are given a complete barrage of what everyone thinks about everything. There's no filter, very little filter. So the speed at which we consume that information, I think, can sometimes be a bit of a tidal wave, and I think that affects our tolerance to it, and I think it also affects how we then react to it. It can be disheartening. It can be, and all of this, I think, means that our art, our social expression, our culture is altered by it. And I'm sure I'm not the only person feeling like this, but we just no idea what comes next, because it feels like we're kind of teetering on the we're going to have to start calling George Orwell a prophet very
Oof.
soon. So,
Oof. There's this pit in my stomach the second you said that.
yeah, it's a fascinating time to be alive. I wouldn't add to that it's hugely positive, but we're certainly experiencing it. So,
Well, it is. There's so much negativity, but I feel like I have seen this great humanity at the same time everywhere.
yeah,
I think it's so easy for us to get distracted by the pain and not really hone in on the bits of good that sometimes come out of it, whether it's these big protest movements we've seen all over the world, or the compassion that we've seen, the way that neighbors are taking care of each other and finding new ways to connect.
It's very true. It's very true. I think actually you hit the nail on the head there, in the sense that it's you can see what you want to see, which is the doom and gloom, the foreboding sense of future ruin, or you can look at how the human race has yet again unified at certain levels to kind of have a single voice and say, this is not what we want. So, and that is very reminiscent, I guess, of the late 60s and how people were bonded in their disapproval. So,
well, it's interesting, because we got into this because we were talking about music and about art, and I think that's so much of the way we learn to interact with history. It is the artistic record that's left of a specific time.
Absolutely.
And I'm so curious to get to hopefully survive this time we live in. That's a legitimate concern for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
But to get 4 or 5 years in the future to be able to look back and almost process what that artistic record is.
Yeah. Music's a strange flux, it feels like. I mean, I think pop has solidified itself throughout history. I mean, good, catchy, disposable pop is not going anywhere. In terms of the genres, I think every era had a very definable genre, certainly through the 20th century into now. But it's hard to know what is the definable genre of our age. What is that? I mean, new wave and punk in the 80s. You had obviously grunge and to some degree metal in the 90s. What is it now? It seems like a really strange hodgepodge where you can dip into retro, with just the same kind of forward thinking as you would if you were listening to disposable pop or stepping back into classical music. It's kind of a weird. I think it's almost as if we've culturally reached the point of the iPod where we can hit the click wheel and there doesn't seem to be some shared forward vision where we've stumbled onto this brand new type of music. And I'd like to see that. I'd like us to suddenly be able to reflect in 5 years and say, oh, that's when we stumbled onto an insert name of new music that's happening.
I had this fella as a guest who his name's Finn McKenty, and he runs a YouTube channel. I don't know if you're familiar with it. He calls himself the Punk Rock MBA, and he's like a music historian. I love his show. I've never seen anyone who knows as much the history and minutia of all these different subgenres and genres of music and the cultures that formed around him as this guy. The one thing that he talks a lot about in those videos, though, is kind of like these newer underground artists that are working today who are, a lot of them are rappers, but they're kind of in different genres, and he's like, watching his videos to turn me on to some of these people. They blend from so many genres now into like this weird, I mean, like you said, it's like a hodgepodge. And I almost wonder if coming into the next decade, something like that's not gonna be.
You could very well be right. I think that sounds like a very credible idea, because I've seen that more and more. I've seen the rap artists commanding these. Yeah, and I feel wrong calling rap artists, because you're right, rap is just one element of what you're seeing.
Yeah, they're doing so much.
Yeah, yeah, you're right, and I have seen. I'm trying to think of the one kid that has always got like 200. Travis, he's always got like 100,000 people at his bloody shows. Obviously not right now,
Yeah.
but that similar thing where you're seeing all these kind of elements drawn in where they're kind of seamlessly blended. Maybe that is the way forward. I would like to see that. I like the idea of innovation. That's not my role in this game. I don't think. I think what you need is some young genius to step in and completely change the landscape.
But hey, that young genius might, his gateway drug might be you, you know?
Hey, you never know. Maybe somebody hears a voice or something you do, and that would be the ultimate, I guess, compliment as to for one of your young peers to move on to something. But I think we're all at any level artistically, we're all just trying to talk to ourselves in some degree and answer some of the questions that are out there, leaving us all feeling a little uncertain, uncomfortable with what's going on. But if somebody can make sense of that and turn it into something brilliant that we all fall behind, fantastic.
I mean, it's necessary. It's in some ways
It is.
it's the greatest thing we do as a society.
Yeah, it really is necessary. Yeah, I mean, they say that the two things that the human race needs most, other than sustenance, is sex and music. Um, and I can only provide one en masse. I suppose you could provide the other. I suppose you could provide the other, but there's some logistics to overcome, particularly at the moment. So
Yeah, no, that is the thing that's I think most off the table
mm-hmm.
for most of the world right now.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I'll be setting up any Scottish sex funds right now. Maybe next week. Maybe next week. We'll see. The week's not over yet. The week's not over yet. It's only Friday.
Yeah, it's like Friday. You've got Saturday, and then you got the whole Sabbath to plan it out.
I'm not showing myself the kind of optimism I should be on that subject. I should just stay focused. And anything's possible,
Alex. I wanted to ask because you've played in a bunch of bands, you've toured for so long.
Mm-hmm.
What's kind of your personal favorite project that you've worked on? Do you have one that is really to you as the standout artistically?
I guess it's a bit like people you've been in love with, if you've been lucky enough to have a lot of relationships in your life, or you're old enough to have had a lot of relationships in your life. Everyone is different. No one is ever the same. And I think they all come with their pros and cons in hindsight. Drive Blind, my band from Scotland, that got signed and came to the US. It was I guess you define as the dream, the very traditional dream in terms of kids wanting to be rock stars, or just be in a great band. We built it from the ground up, and we ended up on the biggest record label in the world, living in LA. But it was also at a point where I wished I could take what I've learned musically. It's a cliche, but I wish I could take the experience. Wish if I'd known then what I know now. But that's you live and learn, and I think I would love to take a lot of lessons that I've learned now and apply it to that situation. But that's what it's experience. The band that was in, and still am, I guess to some degree, we're on a hiatus, but Peter Clett from Candlebox and Scott Mercado from Candlebox, we started a band called Lotus Crush. That was tremendous. That was very liberating because I'd only ever really written with my partner in Drive Blind, because we'd just been writing since we were in school. So that was very liberating in the sense that now I was writing with somebody else. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed how different it was. And that kind of opened up a whole world of possibilities, because then I thought, well, if I can, I can write with one different person, I can try all these different things. Terry McDermott and the Bonfires was great because I don't think I've ever had a more fun tour in my life than our European tour. There just wasn't a single curse word on tour, apart from all the swearing. But there wasn't anything bad happened. We just had this fantastic chemistry, and unfortunately, our guitar player Dave Rosser, who was also the guitar player for the Afghan Wigs, he passed away a couple of years ago. So it kind of put a cap on that band and left it where it was. Didn't have the heart to move on without Dave. But I have to say, in terms of being excited, the project that I've put together, Terry Mac and the Order. Very, very excited about that. In a way, actually, I don't think I have been since I was in Dragline. There's something very raw about it, which I didn't quite realize that I was missing until we stumbled onto it. The guitar player, actually, just to kind of illustrate just how weird the dynamic is, the guitar player in Terry Mac and the Order, Georgi Petrov, is actually Bulgarian. And he's actually a jazz and he's a jazz virtuoso, a blues virtuoso. And a mutual friend said that he knew a guy wanted to be in a rock band. He'd never been in a rock band before, always wanted to be in a rock band. And I was like, oh, great. So, I called him up and, very Bulgarian, very, very jazz. So initially I'm kind of like, how does this work? And I think from the first time we got together, the first time we met, I was like, are you sure you haven't been in a rock band before? I was like, because there is definitely a rock musician trying to get out. And it's like watching somebody take their first steps into that world. And he's just a natural, just really is a natural. I think people will hear that in the songs. So, yeah, it turns out that if you really want to find a great rock guitar player, go looking in jazz bands. So who knew? Who knew? So yeah, this project's a lot of fun. I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and I'm excited about the songs. And I hope people are too when they come out.
What's coming next with them? I mean, when can we expect to see a release or
a release? Well, we actually laid all the drums a few days ago. All the drums are down. I've tracked some vocal tracks. I think by next week we'll probably have the guts of the guitars, the drums down, and then I'll start working the vocals, which will take a little while. My hope is that by the end of the summer we'll have an album of some description. I want to call it an album. It seems like it's so funny even just saying that. It's what it was. It's like 1993. We've got a collection of songs. We're considering breaking it up into 2 EPs because that's way cooler. Or we might just put out a song, let people decide how they feel about it, and then maybe a month or so after we'll start dropping tracks. What I do know is it's a great collection of tunes, and I'm excited about it. If people want to see it, if they actually want to see us play it, we've got a really, I don't know how to describe it. It's I suppose it's a streaming gig. What a surprise! Musicians in COVID-19. I've got a streaming gig. You just and the rest of planet Earth. This one's a little weird though. We're doing it from Port Orleans Brewery here in New Orleans. It's a brewery, and they've got this gigantic front area where they let people taste the beer. So we're actually going to do a gig there on Monday night, and we're going to play the vast majority of the material that will be on the album. So,
will there be an audience live or?
Because of COVID-19, it's going to be very limited. I mean, it's a big space, but I think there'll probably be about 10 people there, 15 people there. Obviously, masked up and socially distanced. There's not really a choice. They have very stringent regulations they have to stick to, which completely respect. Nobody wants to get sick. But the music will be performed, and hopefully people will tune in and have a look.
It's a very exclusive and very lucky 10 to 15 people.
Yeah. It's well, look, it's a new one on me. I don't recall ever playing a brewery. It's like Obi-Wan Kenobi saying, I don't recall owning a droid when there's all this evidence that he did in fact own a droid. But anyway, sorry, I digress. So, well, but I don't recall playing a brewery, so this will be a first.
We're getting towards the end of the program, and I like to end all of these by asking everyone who comes on the same question, which is always kind of a break from the rest of the conversation. But throughout your career, has there been a central message that you've tried to get out to the world? Is there something that you really want to communicate or to convey to your audience or to other people in general? And if so, what is it?
Geez, that's a good one. It's a heavy one.
Yeah, it's like I like to drop it because I always like to ask a couple questions that are completely in a different direction and then drop that to really piss off my guests.
One of the constant, an artist that I've loved since I was a kid and still to this day remains a huge influence, and it's kind of my go-to when not feeling too good about the world, is Richard Ashcroft and The Verve. And what I took away from their work was this kind of sense of we are all alone, but we're together in being alone. If you know what I mean. And I think that's one of the reasons we connect with music on that subject. So I think whether consciously or unconsciously, I think I've tried to keep an element of that in music I write. That there is a unifying bond between us, whether it be in misery or happiness. We're doing this together. So I think there's definitely an element of that in the songs that we're releasing. So I would say, on reflection, that's probably it, is that we are all in this together.
It's a good message to get out there. Probably need more now than ever.
Yeah, well, I mean, whether people hear that, they might be like, "She's Alison Ollerson, tell me that." whether they do or they don't, who knows? But just got to keep trying.
Well, Terry, thank you so much for coming on the program. That is Terry McDermott.
Pleasure.
As always, I'm Alex Cack, and this is Sorry for Rambling. We'll see you next time.
Cheers.